Guys, so today, as you saw on the daily agenda, you are going to be reading in your purple textbook pages 1078 through 1085. So with this video, I'm just going to do a reading with you. That way I can, stop and explain things, and it might help guide you through this if you need the help. All right, so Odysseus, if you recall, was just brought home by the magically swift Phaeacian ship. So that's where we're going to start. In Book 13, Odysseus, laden with gifts, has returned in secret to Ithaca aboard a magically swift Phaeacian ship. In Ithaca, remember, that's his home. So now we're finally getting back to step 16 of that map. So once he arrives back in Ithaca, Athena appears to the hero. Because his home is full of enemies, remember all those suitors that are trying to get Penelope to marry one of them and take over Odysseus's kingdom, Athena advises Odysseus to proceed disguised as a beggar. Now, Odysseus must succeed not only by physical power, but also by intelligence. In Book 14, Odysseus, in his beggar's disguise, finds his way to the hut of Eumaeus, his old and trusty swineherd. Eumaeus is the very image of faithfulness in a servant, a quality much valued in Homer's society. The introduction of members of the so-called servant class as important characters is unusual in epic poetry, and it reflects Homer's originality. So remember, Homer's the one telling the story, and he's the one credited with first writing it down. I already read that. Odysseus is politely entertained by Eumaeus, but the king remains disguised from his old servant. In Book 15, then, Athena appears to Odysseus' son, Telemachus. The young man has gone to Pylos in Sparta, remember, we already read about that, to talk with old comrades of his father with the hope, I guess, of finding out whether Odysseus is alive or dead. Athena advises him to return to Ithaca. His home, the palace of Odysseus, has been overrun by his mother's suitors. These arrogant men are spending money from Telemachus' inheritance on feasting and drinking, and they are demanding that his mother, Penelope, take one of them as a husband. Athena warns Telemachus that the suitors plan to ambush him. Telemachus boards a ship for home, lands secretly on Ithaca, and heads toward the hut of the swineherd. So here's where the suspense with us increases, because we know that's where Odysseus is. Now remember, he is disguised as a beggar, and not just kind of disguised the way we might dress up for Halloween or something, but Athena has disguised him. That means she has used her godly powers to basically transform him into looking entirely different. So the suspense increases as father and son move closer and closer together. Now Homer is ready to recount or tell what could be the most dramatic moment in the epic. Remember that Odysseus has not seen his son for 20 years. 10 years due to the fact that he was fighting in the Trojan War. And then remember, it's taken him 10 years to get back home to Ithaca. Telemachus has been away from Ithaca for a year, talking to King Nestor as well as King Menelaus. Okay, so the meeting of father and son. But there were two men in the mountain hut, Odysseus and Eumaeus the swineherd. At first light, blowing their fire up, they cooked their breakfast and sent their lads out, driving herds to root in the tall timber. When Telemachus came, the wolfish troop of watchdogs only fawned on him as he advanced. That means they recognized him, so they didn't attack or bark or anything like that. They really just recognized him, as your dog probably recognizes you when you get home from school. Odysseus heard them go and heard the light crunch of a man's footfall, at which he turned quickly to say, Eumaeus, here's one of your crew come back, or maybe another friend. The dogs are out there snuffling, belly down. Not one has even growled, and I can hear footsteps. But before he finished, his tall son stood at the door. The swineherd rose in surprise, letting a bowl and jug tumble from his fingers. Going forward, he kissed the young man's head, his shining eyes, and both hands, while his own tears brimmed and fell. Think of a man whose dear and only son, born to him in exile, reared with labor, has lived 10 years abroad, and now returns. How would that man embrace his son? Just so the herdsman clapped his arms around Telemachus and covered him with kisses, for he knew the lad had gotten away from death. So Eumaeus has pretty much raised Telemachus since Odysseus was gone throughout all of Telemachus's childhood. So Eumaeus, this is the first he's seen Telemachus since he's been back from his journey, which he was gone a year. So imagine being gone a year from your parents or a sibling or a grandparent and seeing them for the first time. Like, that's how excited Eumaeus was to see Telemachus. So Eumaeus says, "Light of my days, Telemachus, you made it back. When you took ship for Pylos, I never thought to see you here again. Come in, dear child, and let me feast my eyes. Here you are, home from the distant places. How rarely, anyway, you visit us, your own men and your own woods and pastures. You're always in town. A man would think you love the suitors' company, those dogs." Telemachus, with his clear candor, said, "I am with you, uncle." So uncle here is a term of affection. Eumaeus is not technically his uncle, but I think family doesn't have to be defined by just blood, right? You can think of people as friends, as family, even though they may not biologically be your family. "See now, I have come because I wanted to see you first, to hear from you if mother stayed at home or if she's married off to someone and Odysseus's bed left empty for some gloomy spider's weaving." So here, what does Telemachus want to know? Why, instead of going to see his mom first, did he come to the hut of the servant Eumaeus? And it's because he wanted to find out what the state of affairs is in Ithaca. Did his mom finally give in to the suitors and marry one of them, or is she still holding out? Gently, the forester replied. So Eumaeus replied to this, "At home, indeed, your mother is. Poor lady, still in the women's hall. Her nights and days are wearied out with grieving." Stepping back, he took the bronze-shod lance, and the young prince entered the cabin over the worn doorstone. Odysseus moved aside, yielding his couch, but from across the room, Telemachus checked him out, meaning, "Friend, sit down. We'll find another chair in our own hut. Here's the man to make one." The swineherd, when the quiet man sank down, built a new pile of evergreens and fleeces, a couch for the dear son of great Odysseus, then gave them trenchers, which is like wooden platters, of good meat left over from the roast pork of yesterday, and heaped up willow baskets full of bread and mixed an ivy bowl of honey-hearted wine. So once again, we're seeing that hospitality take effect, right? Then he in turn sat down facing Odysseus, who's disguised as a beggar. Their hands went out upon the meat and drink as they fell to, ridding themselves of hunger. Not realizing that the stranger is his father, Telemachus tries to protect him as best he can. He says that the beggar cannot stay in the palace hall because he'll be abused by the drunken suitors. The swineherd is then sent to Penelope with news of her son's return. Now even Athena cannot stand the suspense any longer. She appears and turns to Odysseus, who is still in beggar's rags. She tipped her golden wand. There's that magical power of the goddesses, right? She tipped her golden wand upon the man, Odysseus, making his cloak pure white and the knit tunic fresh around him. Lithe and young she made him, ruddy with sun, his jawline clean, the beard no longer gray upon his chin. And she withdrew when she had done. So basically, she transformed Odysseus into a younger appearing, strong man, the guy that Telemachus might know as his father. Then Lord Odysseus reappeared, and his son was thunderstruck. Fear in his eyes, he looked down and away, as though it were a god, and he whispered, "Stranger, you are no longer what you were just now. Your cloak is new, even your skin. You must be one of the gods who rule the sweep of heaven. Oh, be kind to us. We'll make you fair oblation and gifts of hammered gold. Please have mercy on us." So Telemachus thinks this man, who we know is his dad, he thinks this person is a god because of the way that he just transformed right in front of him. The noble and enduring man replied, "I'm no god. Why take me for a god? No. I'm that father whom your boyhood lacked and suffered pain for lack of. I am he." Held back too long, the tears ran down his cheeks as he embraced his son. Only Telemachus, uncomprehending, wild with incredulity, cried out, "You cannot be my father, Odysseus." Oh, meddling spirits conceived this trick to twist the knife in me. No man of woman born could work these wonders by his own craft unless a god came into it with ease to turn him young or old at will. I swear you were just in rags and old, and now here you stand like one of the immortals. So first Telemachus denies. He's like, there's no way you can be my dad. And then Odysseus brought his ranging mind to bear and said, this is not princely to be swept away by wonder at your father's presence. No other Odysseus will ever come, for he and I are one, the same. His bitter fortune and his wanderings are mine. 20 years gone, and I'm back again on my own island. Then, throwing his arms around this marvel of a father, Telemachus began to weep. Salt tears rose from the wells of longing in both men, and cries burst from both as keen and fluttering as those of the great taloned hawk, whose nestlings farmers take before they fly. So there's another epic simile, right? Odysseus and Telemachus crying as they are out of joy for finally getting to see one another is being compared to how a mama hawk cries when its babies are taken. So helplessly they cried, pouring out tears, and might have gone on weeping so till sundown. Next portion, the beggar and the faithful dog. So now at this point, the only person that knows that Odysseus has returned is Telemachus, right? He's the only one that knows this beggar is actually Odysseus. So Telemachus returns to the family compound and is greeted tearfully by his mother Penelope and his old nurse Euryclea. A soothsayer, that's kind of like another seer, another prophet, has told his mother that Odysseus is alive and in Ithaca. However, Telemachus does not report that he has seen his father. The suspense builds as Odysseus, once again disguised as a beggar, returns to his home, accompanied only by the swineherd. He has been away for 20 years, and only one creature recognizes him. Okay, so imagine Odysseus is going to basically do a recon of his kingdom, right? He's in disguise. He's going now into his palace to kind of check out the situation, to do a reconnaissance, find out what's going on, if anybody's loyal, what's the state of affairs. All right, so Odysseus is walking up as a beggar with Eumaeus, who still thinks of him as the beggar. And he enters and he says, while he spoke, an old hound lying near pricked up his ears and lifted up his muzzle. This was Argos, trained as a puppy by Odysseus, but never taken on a hunt before his master sailed for Troy. The young men afterward hunted wild goats with him and hare and deer, but he had grown old in his master's absence. So here's a dog who has to be 20 years old, right? Because that's how long Odysseus has been gone. Treated as rubbish now, he lay at last on a mass of dung before the gates. Manure of mules and cows, piled there until field hands could spread it on the king's estate. Abandoned there and half destroyed with flies, old Argos lay. So how sad must this be for Odysseus? His dog, his puppy, who hadn't seen him in 20 years, is laying there not being taken care of. Odysseus's voice nearby, he did his best to wag his tail, nose down, with flattened ears, having no strength to move nearer his master. And the man looked away, wiping a salt tear from his cheek. But he hid this from Eumaeus. Then he said, I marvel that they leave this hound to lie here on the dung pile. He would have been a fine dog from the look of him, though I can't say as to his power and speed when he was young. You find the same good build in house dogs. Table dogs landowners keep all for style. And you replied, Eumaeus, a hunter owned him, but the man is dead in some far place. So here Eumaeus is recounting to this beggar that they think Odysseus is dead, right? So how must Odysseus, the beggar, feel? If this old hound could show the form he had when Lord Odysseus left him going to Troy, you'd see him swift and strong. He never shrank from any savage thing he brought to bay in the deep woods. On the scent, no other dog kept up with him. Now misery has him in leash. His owner died abroad, and here the women slaves will take no care of him. Unihouse servants are. Without a master, they have no will to labor or excel. For Zeus, who views the wide world, takes away half the manhood of a man that day he goes into captivity and slavery. So basically they're saying without a boss, these workers, the servants, aren't doing their jobs as they should be. It's kind of like when the cat's away, the mice will play. as you've heard that. So when your teacher's out of the room, do you continue working as you should, or do you take it easy and kind of set things aside because you know no one's there watching you? Eumaeus crossed the court and went straight forward into the Megaron among the suitors. But death and darkness in that instant closed the eyes of Argos, who had seen his master, Odysseus, after 20 years. So it's almost like Argos, this great loyal dog, waited for his master to come home, and he alone recognized Odysseus in this disguise. And he's like, finally, my master's home. I can let go. And he dies. Okay, last page here. In the hall, the beggar, remember that's Odysseus, is taunted by the evil suitors, but Penelope supports him. So she's still honoring, obviously, this hospitality custom. She has learned that the ragged stranger claims to have news of her husband. Unaware of who the beggar is, she invites him to visit her later in the night to talk about Odysseus. In Book 18, Penelope appears among the suitors and reproaches or yells at Telemachus for allowing the stranger to be abused. She certainly must have warmed her husband's heart by doing this, and also by singing the praises of her lost Odysseus. And you're going to get a clearer picture of this once you guys go over and read the graphic novel, because this is all portrayed there. Here, remember, this is just kind of a summary of what our textbook has left out. In Book 19, the suitors depart for the night, and Odysseus and Telemachus discuss their strategy. The clever hero goes as appointed to Penelope with the idea of testing her and her maids. Some of the maids have not been loyal to the household and have been involved with the suitors. The faithful wife receives her disguised husband. We can imagine the tension Homer's audience must have felt. Would Odysseus be recognized by his wife, Penelope? The beggar spins a yarn about his origins, pretending that he has met Odysseus on his travels. He cannot resist praising the lost hero, and he does so successfully enough to bring tears to Penelope's eyes. We can be sure that this does not displease her husband. The storytelling beggar reveals that he has heard that Odysseus is alive and is even now sailing for home. Penelope calls for the old nurse, Euryclea, and asks her to wash the guest's feet, a sign of respect and honor. As Euryclea does so, she recognizes Odysseus from a scar on his leg. So now Telemachus knows that this beggar is in fact Odysseus, as does this maid, Euryclea, who knows Odysseus' scar on his leg. Quickly, Odysseus swears the old nurse to secrecy. Meanwhile, Athena has cast a spell on Penelope so that she has taken no notice of this recognition scene. Penelope adds to the suspense by deciding on a test for the suitors on the next day. Without realizing it, she has given Odysseus a way to defeat the men who threaten his wife and kingdom. In Book 20, Odysseus, brooding over the shameless behavior of the maidservants and the suitors, longs to destroy his enemies, but he fears the revenge of their friends. Athena reassures him. Odysseus is told that the suitors will die. So we'll keep reading next week about how this revenge plan, what is this contest that Penelope has set up for the suitors, and how does Odysseus become, I guess, one of the contestants in this contest, okay? I'm going to send you over to read now the graphic novel. I'm not going to do a video for it. I think you guys can work your way through the graphic novel, which I have scanned its pages and put on the daily agenda or linked it to that as well. If you have questions, as always, please email me and I will do my best to get back with you shortly. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.